Another day, another story. On August 20, 1619, 20-and-odd Angolans, kidnapped by the Portuguese, arrive in the British colony of Virginia and are then bought by English colonists. The arrival of the enslaved Africans in the New World marks a beginning of 2.5 centuries of slavery in North America. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. The arrival of the first enslaved Africans in Jamestown, Virginia, in 1619 marked a significant and dark chapter in American history. These individuals were brought to the English colonies on a Dutch ship and were initially treated as indentured servants, a status that was not uncommon in the early years of English colonization. The arrival of the first enslaved Africans in Jamestown, Virginia, marked a significant and unfortunate turning point in American history. This event took place in August 1619 when a Dutch ship, the White Lion, brought about 20 enslaved Africans to the English colony of Jamestown. These individuals were not initially treated as chattel slaves, some may have been considered indentured servants, and their status was not entirely clear. Over time, however, the institution of slavery became entrenched in the American colonies, evolving into a system based on race and perpetuated through hereditary enslavement. The 1619 arrival is often cited as the beginning of African slavery in what would become the United States. The enslaved Africans who arrived in Jamestown were subjected to harsh and dehumanizing conditions, and their forced labor became integral to the economic development of the southern colonies. As the institution of slavery expanded, it became deeply rooted in the economic, social, and political fabric of the American colonies and, later, the United States. Slavery persisted for centuries, and its legacy had profound and enduring effects on the nation, including contributing to racial disparities and inequalities that persist to some extent today. The history of slavery in America is complex and painful, and acknowledging this history is crucial for understanding the broader context of the nation's development. Indentured servitude was a system in which individuals worked for a set number of years in exchange for passage to the New World and eventual freedom. However, over time, the institution of slavery evolved in the American colonies, and the legal framework that supported it became more entrenched. By the mid-17th century, the status of Africans in the English colonies shifted from indentured servitude to chattel slavery. This transition was influenced by various factors, including economic considerations, the desire for a stable and cheap labor force, and the need for a social hierarchy that justified the subjugation of certain groups. As the institution of slavery became more institutionalized, laws were enacted to codify and regulate the enslavement of Africans and their descendants. These laws restricted the rights and freedoms of enslaved individuals, defining them as property rather than as people with inherent rights. Slavery played a central role in shaping the economic, social, and cultural landscape of the American colonies and, later, the United States. The legacy of slavery persists in various ways, influencing the nation's history, institutions, and social fabric. The struggle for civil rights and racial equality has been an ongoing and significant part of American history, with the effects of slavery still felt today. Understanding this historical context is crucial for addressing the complex issues surrounding race and inequality in the United States. Founded at Jamestown in 1607, the Virginia colony was home to about 700 people by 1619. The first enslaved Africans to arrive in Virginia disembarked at Point Comfort, in what is today known as Fort Monroe. Most of their names, as well as the exact number who remained at Point Comfort, have been lost to history, but much is known about their journey. They were originally kidnapped by Portuguese colonial forces, who sent captured members of the native Congo and Ndongo kingdoms on a forced march to the port of Luanda, the capital of modern-day Angola. From there, they were ordered on the ship San Juan Bautista, which set sail for Veracruz in the colony of New Spain. As was quite common, about 150 of the 350 captives aboard the ship died during the crossing. Then, as it approached its destination, the ship was attacked by two privateer ships, the White Lion and the Treasurer. Crews from the two ships kidnapped up to 60 of the Bautista's enslaved people. It was the White Lion which docked at Virginia colony's Point Comfort and traded some of the prisoners for food on August 20, 1619. Scholars note that the arrivals were technically sold as indentured servants. Indentured servants agreed, or in many cases were forced, to work with no pay for a set amount of time, often to pay off a debt, and could legally expect to become free at the end of the contract. Many Europeans who arrived in the Americas came as indentured servants. Despite this classification, and records which indicate that some of them did eventually obtain their freedom, it is clear that the Africans arriving at Point Comfort in 1619 were forced into servitude and that they fit the Universal Declaration of Human Rights definition of enslaved peoples. The arrival at Point Comfort marked a new chapter in the history of the transatlantic slave trade, which began in the early 1500s and continued into the mid-1800s. The trade uprooted roughly 12 million Africans, depositing roughly 5 million in Brazil and over 3 million in the Caribbean. Though the number of Africans brought to mainland North America was relatively small, roughly 400,000, their labor and that of their descendants was crucial to the economies of the British colonies and, later, the United States. Two of the Africans who arrived aboard the White Lion, Antonio and Isabella, became servants of Captain William Tucker, commander of Point Comfort. Their son William is the first known African child to have been born in America, and under the law of the time he was born a freeman. In the coming decades, however, slavery became codified. Servants of African origin were oftentimes forced to continue working after the end of their contract, and in 1640 a Virginia court sentenced rebellious servant John Punch to a lifetime of slavery. With fewer white indentured servants arriving from England, a racial caste system developed and African servants were increasingly held for life. In 1662, a Virginia court ruled that children born to enslaved mothers were the property of the mother's owner. As cash crops like tobacco, cotton and sugar became pillars of the colonial economy, slavery became its engine. Though the slave trade was outlawed in 1807, chattel slavery and the plantation economy it made possible flourished in the South. The 1860 census found that there were 3,953,760 enslaved people in the United States, making up roughly 13% of the total population. The conflict between abolitionists and those who wanted to preserve and spread slavery was a major catalyst in the outbreak of the Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln formally freed enslaved people in the South with the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, although it was not until the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865 that slavery was formally abolished in the United States. In the end, 246 brutal years of slavery had an incalculable effect on American society. It would take another century after the Civil War for racial segregation to be declared unconstitutional, but the end of state-sanctioned racism was by no means the end of racism and discrimination in America. Because it became a crucial part of the culture and economy of early America after its introduction in Jamestown, slavery is often referred to as the nation's original sin. Resistance and rebellion. Explore the stories of enslaved individuals who resisted their enslavement through various means, including escape, revolts, and forming communities of escaped slaves, such as the Maroons. Legal and social codes. Delve into the development of slave codes and laws that institutionalized slavery, imposing harsh restrictions on enslaved people and reinforcing the notion of racial hierarchy. Daily life in slavery. Examine the daily lives of enslaved individuals, including their work, family structures, cultural practices, and the challenges they faced. Abolitionist movements. Explore the emergence of early abolitionist sentiments and movements in North America. Impact on economy and development. Investigate how slavery influenced the economic development of the American colonies and, later, the United States. The Underground Railroad. Narrate stories of the Underground Railroad, a network of secret routes and safe houses that helped enslaved individuals escape to freedom in the northern states or Canada. Diverse experiences. Recognize the diversity within the enslaved population, including variations in experiences based on geography, labor demands, and local attitudes towards slavery. Cultural contributions. Highlight the cultural contributions of African Americans, including music, art, and language, which have played a significant role in shaping American culture. Legacy and contemporary issues. Discuss how the legacy of slavery continues to impact contemporary society, addressing issues such as systemic racism, inequality, and ongoing efforts for justice and reconciliation. Education and literacy. Investigate the challenges and opportunities for education and literacy among enslaved individuals. Medical experimentation. Examine the unethical medical experiments conducted on enslaved individuals, particularly during the 19th century. Legal cases and court challenges. Highlight significant legal cases and court challenges related to slavery. Economic resistance. Explore acts of economic resistance by enslaved individuals, such as slowing down work, breaking tools, or engaging in other forms of sabotage. Free Black communities. Explore the stories of free Black communities in both the North and the South. Despite facing discrimination, these communities often thrived economically and culturally, contributing significantly to the development of African American identity. Global abolition movements. Examine the connections between the abolitionist movements in North America and similar movements around the world. Art and music as resistance. Explore how enslaved individuals expressed resistance and resilience through art and music. Contraband camps. Investigate the establishment of contraband camps during the Civil War. These camps provided refuge for escaped slaves and became centers for education, employment, and community building. Legacy in contemporary culture. Explore how the legacy of slavery is reflected in contemporary culture, literature, music, and art. Consider how artists and writers grapple with the historical trauma and its lasting impact on society. These stories provide a more nuanced understanding of the complexities and resilience associated with the history of slavery in North America. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.